Vanakkam. Hello friends. We have been seeing about the contribution made by the Kalabhras to Tamil language and literature. Tamil language was undergoing an important phase of evolution with the script shifting from Tamil Brahmi to Vatteluthu. And the Kalabhras, by extensively using the Vatteluthu in their inscriptions, helped popularize the script. Not only that, their inscriptions were in simple Tamil, paving the way for the others to follow. Under their patronage, the Buddhist and Jaina monks, through their Sangha, the Palli, made immense contribution to the enrichment of Tamil language and literature. The Padanin Keelkanakku Noolgal, the huge volume of didactic works that came into vogue following the closure of the Sangam era literature, showcased the ideology of the heretic faiths. These included works like the Nanmani Kadihai, the Iniyavai Narpadu, Inna Narpadu, Thirikadugam, Yeladi, and so on. The Aimperum Kapiyangal, the five great epics, beginning with Silappadigaram and Manimehilai, that were composed during the rule of the Kalabhras, followed by Valayabadi, Kundalakesi and Jeevaha Sindhamani, were some of the first epics to be composed in Tamil literature. This was followed by the Ainchiru Kapiyangal, the smaller epics that included the Udayana Kumara Kaviyam, Naha Kumara Kaviyam, Yasodhara Kaviyam, Sudamani and Neelakesi. Again, all these 10 works professed the heretic faith, and interestingly, we find that the trading community, the Vanihachatu, who adhere to the heretic faiths, are given a place of prominence in many of these epics, with the hero and heroine of a few works like the Silappadigaram belonging to these communities. We have seen how these trading communities not only patronized the religions, but also offered strong support to the Kalabhra rulers through their personal armies. We also saw about the contribution of the Jaina monks to Tamil grammar in the works that were composed like Yaparangalam, Yaparangalakarihe and Nannul, which laid down the new rules for the new kind of meters, the Pavahegal, that were introduced into Tamil literature through their works. Then came the lexicons, the Nigandu. The very first Nigandu in Tamil language, believed to have been compiled around the 6th century Common Era by one Divagara Munivar known as Divagaram. The lingering influence of the Kalabhras continued for centuries after their downfall in the 6th century, and their lineages continued to rule from smaller provinces. This in turn ensured the continued patronage of the heretic faiths. We saw how words from Pali and Prakrit entered the Tamil language and vice versa. The mutual influence continued for a very long time. Professor Mu Arunachalam, in his work, The Kalabhras in the Pandya country and their impact on the life and letters there, gives an interesting example that captures the continued influence of their role in the work Tiruvasagam. Tiruvasagam is a compilation of the devotional hymns sung by the saint poet Manikavasagar, who belonged to the 9th century Common Era. Legend goes that under the name Tennavan Brahmarayan, he served as a minister in the court of a Pandya ruler, presumed to be Varaguna Pandya II, who ruled between 862 and 880. In a section in the Tiruvasagam titled Arul Pattu, every stanza ends with the line, Adiyen Adarithu Azhaithal Adenduve endru arulaye. My Lord, when I fondly call out to you, you refrain from answering. What is the matter? Now this phrase, what is the matter, is represented in this verse by the term Adenduve, which is not a Tamil term but a Kannada word. So how does Manikavasagar end up using a Kannada word, Adendu, quite naturally? The Kalabhras' mother tongue was an early form of Kannada, and such Kannada works had entered into colloquial Tamil usage and had stayed in Pandinadu centuries after they left. Well, Mu Arunachalam also opines that as followers of the heretic faiths, The Kalabhra rulers considered music and arts as taboo, and that all these arts had all but disappeared during their 300-year rule. This was a notion held on to by many scholars, and Mu Arunachalam goes on to show how the Bhakti movement, spearheaded by the poet saint Tirnyana Sambandar, who comes in the early part of the 7th century, helped revive the fine arts in Tamilagam. However, Dr. Padmavati decimates this theory with logical argument. In the Silappadigaram, a work composed by Ilango Adigal, in the Arangetra Kadai, the author beautifully records the flourishing art scene of Puhar. It is a delight to read the nuances of classical dance, right from stage settings and dimensions. Ilango Adigal even writes about the 3 kinds of curtains that were used on stage. Orumuga Elini for curtains that were pulled from one side, Edirmuga Elini when there was another curtain coming from the opposite side as well, and Karandu Varal Elini for a curtain that went from top to bottom. Imagine all this in existence 1600 years before now. He mentions the vocalists and the instrumentalists, that is the Pakavatyam, who accompanied a dance performance, and shows how the dancers, Madhavi, started learning dance at the tender age of 5. Sadiratam, as the art form was known then, was a native invention of Tamil country, and this was hijacked and later rechristened as Bharatanatyam. Well, with a suitable story to go with it, that it was invented by Bharata Muni, and the rules of the dance form were enclosed in his treatise, the Natya Shastra. Who was Bharata Muni? When and where did he live? There is no proof to show that he was an actual historical personage, and his time period is given anywhere between 200 BCE to 500 Common Era. Well, the work itself exists and is more likely to have been a compilation done by many authors over a period of time, taking ideas from the different traditions that thrived then. According to Dr. Pramod Kale, who received his doctorate on the text from the University of Wisconsin, USA, the surviving version of Natya Shastra is likely to have been compiled by the 8th century at the earliest, while Silappadigaram comes at least 400 years before that. Many references of the Padini, the Virali, that is the singing and dancing women, and the Panan, the poets, are found in the Sangam literary works, attesting to a very ancient and thriving tradition. So this is how narratives are invented and hoisted upon unsuspecting populations by vested interest groups. The tragedy being that the medieval Tamil kings who came to power after the Kalabhras totally gave in to the domination of Vedic Brahmins and allowed them to create many such false narratives, including narratives for their own lineage, as well as for the many holy sites in the country that go by the names Talapuranas. Sadly, the Tamil people to this day fail to question their veracity. Now, I will leave a link here of a much earlier episode which covers the story of the Talapurana of the holiest of Saivite places, that is Thillai, today's Chidambaram. Another solid proof that the Kalabhra rulers as well as the heretic faiths nurtured fine arts is offered by the Arachalur Kalvettu. These inscriptions found on a Jaina site, a Palli, in Arachalur in the Erode district contain the earliest known musical inscriptions. Based on the style of lettering that shows a transformation to Vatteluthu, these inscriptions have been dated to the 3rd and 4th century Common Era, definitely belonging to the Kalabhra period, points out Dr. Padmavati. The inscription carries certain notations, Thala Isaikattu, known as Ta, Tai, etc., and mentions that many Vannams were composed by a Mani Vannakkan Devan Satan, in his very name carrying the word Vannam, which may be today's equivalent of Varnam, a musical piece. So this person was somebody who composed a lot of Vannams. Dr. Padmavati puts forth a sound argument to show that music and dance continued to flourish during the Kalabhra interregnum. How? Through the life of the Saivite saint Thirunyana Sambandar, who comes in the early half of the 7th century, almost immediately after the fall of the Kalabhras. Sambandar was born in Sirgadi in Chola country, which of course was not under the Chola rule at that time. While Kadungon Pandyan had displaced the Kalabhras from Madurai by the middle of the 6th century, the Pallava king Simhavishnu Pallava had displaced the Kalabhra rulers from Tondainadu by around 575 Common Era. So what happened in Chola country? While parts of Solanadu were under the control of the Pallavas, many a small chieftain who ruled during the Kalabhra Rajyam simply continued during this period, and some of them rose to great prominence like the Muttarayar, about whom we will see later. It was only in the 10th century that the imperial Cholas rose to power. So during the times of Thirunyana Sambandar, the rulers of Solanadu were not exactly patrons of Saivism. Nevertheless, Thirunyana Sambandar goes all around the Chola country singing many padihams on the presiding deities of different Saivite shrines. And what is of interest is the many phrases that are used to describe the social life of that time. That of course includes music and dance. A classic example being the Thiruvayaru Padiham, singing the praise of Lord Shiva in Thiruvayaru on the banks of the river Kaveri. The beautiful Padiham in the first Tirumurai begins with the lines Pulanaindum Pori Kalangi Neri Mayangi. And some of the phrases go Valam vanda madavargal nadavada mulavu adira malayen ranji. Dancers came dancing around the streets to the accompaniment of loud drums that were like thunders descending from the skies. Kol valayar koothada goes another phrase. Beautiful women wearing bangles dancing around. Kandaram isayamaithu காரிகையார் பண்பாட கவினார் வீதி தேன் தாம் என்றரங்கேறி சேயிழையார் நடமாடும் திருவையாரே. Gandhara Isai denotes heavenly music, and so we had these beautiful dancing ladies singing the Pan Isai, dancing on the streets of Thiruvayaru. Several padihams similarly capture the continuing music and dance traditions of the Tamil people, preserved and nurtured and not restricted by the Kalabhra rulers or the chieftains who owed them their allegiance. And now comes the clincher pointed out by Mailai Sini Vengadasamy, the first and foremost of the Thevara hymnists who paved the way for others like Thirunyana Sambandar to follow, who came after the Sangam period, somewhere between the 3rd and 5th century Common Era, definitely during the Kalabhra rule, was the great lady poet saint Karaikal Ammayar. A real historical personage, she belonged to the trading community as well and lived in Puhar. One of the only 3 women devotees who find a place in the list of the 63 Nayanmars of Periyapuranam. She propagated Saivism through the Tamil-speaking country at a time when Buddhism and Jainism were at its peak. Vouching for the religious tolerance of the Kalabhra rulers, Karaikal Ammayar sang on the Lord presiding at Thiruvalangadu, and her collection of hymns are known as Mootha Tiruppadiham. The epithet Mootha meaning seniority, here denoting the seniority in terms of timeline. And in the 9th stanza in this compilation, she enlists musical notes and instruments. துத்தம் கைக்கிளை விளரி தாரம் உளை இழி ஓசை பன் கெழுமப்பாடி சச்சரி கொக்கரை தக்கையோடு தகுநீசர் துந்துமி தாளம் வீணை மத்தளம் காடிகை முன்கை மென்தோல் தமருகம் குடமுழா மொந்தை வாசித்து தன்மை வினோடாடும் எங்கள் அப்பனிடம் திருவாலங்காடு go the lines. The terms குரல், துத்தம், கைக்கிளை, உளை, இழி, விளரி and தாரம் denote the 7 notations in the ancient Tamil music system called Pannisai, and the combination of these 7 notations gives rise to the pangal, that is the equivalent of the ragas in today's Carnatic music, where ragas are created by the permutation and combinations of the 7 notations sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni. Classical Tamil music, known as Pannisai, forms the foundation on which Carnatic music stands. Karaikal Ammayar then enlists several instruments, string instruments like the tundubi and veena, and percussion instruments like the mattalam and damaruham. Her works thus offer unquestionable proof of the music traditions of ancient Tamils that continued intact during the Kalabhra rule. Kuthu, meaning drama, was always popular with the Tamil people and continued to be so during Kalabhra rule, points out Sini Vengadasamy. He quotes from a work called Vilakkattanar Kuthu, composed by one Vilakkattanar, most of which today has been lost to us. Mailai Sini Vengadasamy then goes on to elaborate on the contribution of the Kalabhras to architecture. He explains how many different kinds of temple structures of Saivite temples dedicated to Lord Shiva are mentioned by the poet saints Thirunjana Sambandar and Thirunavukarasar in their Thevaram hymns. Terms such as Karakkoyil, Thunganai Madam, Nalar Koyil, Manikoyil, Perungoyil and Ilangoyil denoted different types of temple structures, possibly built out of bricks and lime mortar in styles that were developed earlier and continued during the Kalabhra rule. Being perishable materials, all these structures are lost to us. Of course, there were also the Buddhist viharas and the Jaina temples that were known as Jinagaras. The Buddhist work Abhidhammavadaram describes a huge monastery that was situated in Kaveri Pumpattinam, built by one Kannadasan, who was a minister of the Kalabhra ruler at that time. It describes the vihara as a huge structure with tall walls and ornamental gates made of white lime mortar, that is Vensudai. The author Buddhadattar mentions that the vihara looked like the snow-clad Mount Kailasha. An odd comparison indeed, in that it was associated later in Saivism as the holiest of holy abodes of Lord Shiva. Vengadasamy surmises that there must have been works of art and sculpture adorning these buildings, made out of either wood or stucco, that should have been destroyed over time along with the original structures. In the important Jaina site of Chittanavasal in Pudukkottai district, an inscription in Vatteluthu belonging to the 9th century shows that a painter by name Madurai Asriyan Ilangautamanar recreated the rock cut paintings. It clearly mentions that the old rock cut temples were renovated. Kudavarayai Pudukki goes the term, and paintings were rendered on top of the older paintings. So it can be understood that the original structure and the artwork should have been executed earlier during the Kalabhra times, points out Dr. Padmavati. We saw about 3 such shrines mentioned in the Pulanguruchi inscriptions as well, all of which were ravaged by time. They too must have been built of brick and lime mortar. Now, it is a known fact that when Mahendravarma Pallava executed his famed rock temples of Mamallapuram, he designed them on the lines of the then existing temple structures that were made of bricks. Vengadasamy notes that it is reasonable to assume that some of these structures should have evolved during the Kalabhra rule. While in general we associate rock-cut temples with the Pallavas, history shows that dozens of rock-cut temples were found in Pandya country, especially around the regions of Madurai and Tiruchi, created long before the advent of the Pallavas. However, we do not know the names of the rulers who executed these rock-cut temples. Dr. Padmavati quotes from a 6th century inscription in a rock-cut temple at Melacheri in Viluppuram district, which records that the wife of a Kalabhra ruler named Sikvari built a rock-cut temple named Pallaveshwaram at a place called Singapuram. This serves adequate proof that the Kalabhras had continued ruling as minor chieftains in Tondainadu during the 6th century after Simhavishnu Pallava came to power. Dr. Padmavati points out that many semi-finished rock-cut temple structures from that period indicate that the works commissioned by the Kalabhra rulers could not be completed by them as they had lost power. One important and now very popular rock-cut temple in the Pandya country with its famed rock-cut Ganesha is the temple at Playarpatti. An inscription here carries the name of the place as well as the name of the sculptor who created the elephant god. Albeit found in a highly damaged condition, the inscription reads, Ekkaturu Kon Perundasan. Playarpatti was itself known as Ekkaturu way back, and the name of the sculptor was Perundasan. This inscription, by style of writing, is dated to around 4th 5th century Common Era, putting it during the Kalabhra rule, and it is considered a very important inscription in that it traces the evolution of the Tamil alphabet from Tamil Brahmi to Vatteluthu, with the inscription carrying both Tamil Brahmi and Vatteluthu characters. So based on this and the style of carving, having been dated to the Kalabhra period, Dr. Padmavati points out that the elephant could have been the royal emblem of the Kalabhras. Kalaba meant elephant, and the Kalabhras were known as Kalabakula. Well, it is a known fact that the temple dedicated to Lord Shiva that we see today came about centuries after and was built to accommodate rock sculpture of Pillayar in one corner. Well, if you look at the history of the temple, nowhere is this mentioned. However, C.N. Venkadasamy too mentions Pillayarpatti's association with the Kalabhras in his book. The practice of creating bas relief, that is the Pudaippachirpam, of the Jaina Tirthankaras on rock was followed extensively from before and during the Kalabhra rule, especially in Pandyanadu, in regions around Madurai and Pudukkottai. Many of these bas reliefs exist to this day, telling their silent story. So we need to really connect the dots to understand history in its true perspective. We will continue to look into the rule of the Kalabhras and how their rule came to an end in the 6th century in the next episode. Vanakkam.